A slap. Sharp, flat, ugly. Not the kind you hear in movies, padded and cinematic. This one cracks across the emergency department like a gunshot, bouncing off every hard surface, cutting through the rhythmic beeping of machines and the low murmur of nurses and the quiet suffering of strangers. And then silence. Complete, suffocating silence. Dr. Sade Bello is 38 years old, Nigerian-born, Lagos-raised. She came to South Korea on a research fellowship 11 years ago and never left, not because she couldn't, but because Seoul General's trauma unit was the best in Asia, and Sade Bello did not settle for second best. Ever. She speaks Korean fluently. She speaks it better than some of her colleagues. She learned it in 2 years by listening, by refusing to let embarrassment slow her down, by staying late in the break room with a dictionary and a bowl of ramyeon until the words stopped sounding foreign and started sounding like home. She is, by every measurable metric, the finest trauma surgeon in the building. Her colleagues know it. The senior staff know it. Even the hospital director, a man who has never once said anything kind to a subordinate, knows it. But knowing something and saying it out loud are two very different things. Because Dr. Sade Bello is black, and foreign, and a woman, and in 11 years, not a single one of those 3 facts has stopped mattering to someone somewhere on some random Tuesday afternoon. She has been passed over for promotions she earned. She has been introduced to patients as the assistant when she was the lead surgeon. She has had family members ask, mid-procedure briefing, if they could speak to the real doctor. She has never, not once, reacted. Not with tears, not with anger, not with the cold, devastating silence she could use as a weapon if she chose to. She just works, harder, better, longer, until the work becomes undeniable. That's who Dr. Sade Bello is. Which makes what happens next even more important to understand. The trauma bay at 11:47 p.m. on a Wednesday night. They wheel him in fast, too fast, which means the paramedics are scared, which means the situation is bad. 17 years old. His name is Park Jae-ho. He came off a motorcycle at approximately 70 kilometers per hour on the Han River overpass. He wasn't wearing a helmet. The impact shattered 2 ribs on his left side and drove one of them, clean as a knife, into the lining around his heart. The technical term is hemopneumothorax, complicated by cardiac tamponade. The non-technical term is, he is dying right now, in real time, and the window to stop it is closing. Sade is already gloved when they bring him in. She doesn't wait for the full handoff report. She doesn't need it. She can read it in his color, in the distension of his neck veins, in the shallow, terrified way his chest tries and fails to rise. She calls out her orders with the calm of someone reading a grocery list. Get me 2 large-bore IVs. Type and cross for 4 units. I need a chest tray and I need it now. Someone call the OR and tell them we might be coming up. Move. The team moves. They always move for her, not out of fear, out of trust. Because when Dr. Sade Bello speaks in a trauma bay, she has already seen 12 possible outcomes and is steering toward the one where the patient lives. She opens his chest on the left side with a precision that makes the intern in the corner hold his breath. Blood, a lot of it controlled. Her hands don't shake. The boy's pressure stabilizes slightly. She exhales once, just once, then keeps working. And that is when the doors burst open. The woman is in her mid-40s. Expensive coat. Mascara already destroyed. She has clearly been crying since the moment someone called her, and now that she's here, now that she can see the blood, the machines, the terrible intimacy of her child lying cut open under fluorescent lights, the grief has curdled into something uglier. Ray. She shoves past the nurse at the door. Where is my son? Where is Jae-ho? What are you people doing to him? Security moves to intercept her. Sade raises one hand without looking up. Let her in, carefully. The nurse hesitates. Doctor, she shouldn't be. She's his mother, Sade says simply. Let her in. The woman pushes through. She sees the blood. She sees the instruments. She sees Sade and something shifts in her expression. Not just grief now, Something sharper, something ugly and specific. "What are you doing to my child?" she screams. "I'm keeping him alive," Sade says, still not looking up. His heart was compressing under the blood. "I've relieved the pressure. His BP is improving." "I didn't ask you to cut him open. Who authorized this? I want a different doctor. I want a Korean doctor." That word hangs in the air. Korean. Everyone in the room hears exactly what it means. Sade's hands don't stop moving. "You can request a different attending after we stabilize him," she says evenly. "Right now, I am the doctor and this is my patient." The woman's hand comes up before anyone can stop it. The slap lands across Sade's cheek, hard enough to snap her head sideways. The room stops. The monitors keep beeping. Sade turns back to the patient. "2 units of packed red cells," she says quietly. "Now." Nobody moves. They're all staring. "Now," she repeats calmly. "He's still bleeding." The woman doesn't stop. She's crying and screaming now, the worst combination, because it sounds like grief, but the words coming out are something else entirely. "You Africans think you're better than everyone. Coming here, taking our jobs, touching our children with your hands. If a real doctor was here, my son wouldn't be dying. You let him suffer on purpose. I know what you people do. You experiment on patients. You practice on the ones you don't care about." Each sentence lands in the room like a stone into still water. The ripples go everywhere. Every nurse, every intern, the orderly by the door, the family of another patient partially visible through the curtain. All of them are watching Dr. Sade Bello, waiting to see what she does. Because in their experience, in the experience of most human beings, being publicly degraded like this produces one of 2 responses. You break or you explode. Sade does neither. She checks the boy's pupils. She listens to his chest. She asks for updated vitals in a steady voice. The woman's words wash over her like water over stone. Not because she doesn't hear them, but because she has heard them before, in different mouths, different languages, different rooms, and she learned a long time ago that the only thing those words can actually take from you is the thing you hand over willingly. She is not handing anything over tonight. The nurses feel it before they see it. A shift in the atmosphere of the hallway. A hush spreading outward like ripples. The sound of expensive shoes on linoleum. The low murmur of men speaking in the careful, controlled tones of people who are paid to be inconspicuous. Then Park Min-yi walks through the door. Assemblyman Park Min-yi, representative for Yonggu District, member of the National Assembly for the past 12 years, rumored candidate for a ministerial position within the next 2 years, known for his nationalist policy positions, his sharp suits, his sharper temper, and his absolute, uncompromising expectation that the world will bend itself around his convenience. He is not alone. He is never alone. 6 men follow him in, not police, not government officials, private security, the kind that stands close and says nothing and watches everything. His eyes move through the room quickly. His wife, the machines, the blood, the boy. And then Sade. His expression doesn't change. That's what makes it frightening. There's no visible spike of anger, no reddening of the face, just a cold, almost administrative assessment, like he is looking at a problem and calculating its solution. "What is the situation?" he says, not a question, a command. His wife rushes to him immediately. "She cut him open without permission. She operated without telling us, she just, look at him, look at what she did to him." "I performed an emergency thoracotomy," Sade says clearly, still not pausing her work. "Your son had blood compressing his heart. Without intervention 4 minutes ago, he would have died on this table. His pressure is now stabilizing. The immediate threat is controlled." Park looks at her for a long moment. "Step away from my son." "Sir." "I said step away." Sade looks up for the first time. She meets his eyes directly. No deference, no submission, no performance of the smallness he expects. "If I step away from your son right now," she says slowly, "he will die within 3 minutes. I can say that with confidence. You can have me removed from this room the moment he is stable and transferred to ICU. But right now, I am not leaving this table. Something moves in Park's eyes. He is not used to this. He is not used to any of it, the refusal to shrink, the directness, the complete absence of fear. It doesn't compute. And what men like Park Min-yi cannot compute, they attack. He crosses the room in 4 steps. His hand closes around Sade's wrist, hard, sudden, the grip of someone who has grabbed people before and watched them crumble. The room gasps. Not a single person moves. You will speak to me with respect, he says quietly. Do you understand who I am? Sade looks down at his hand on her wrist, then back up at him. Remove your hand, she says softly. The softness is more alarming than shouting would be. You are nobody, Park says. You are a foreign doctor in my country, treating my child without my permission, and you will speak to me with the deference appropriate to. Your son's blood pressure is dropping, Sade says. If you want to be angry at me after he's stable. Remove your hand. Park releases her. But then, and this is the moment everything fractures, he shoves her. Hard. Both hands straight into her sternum, and she goes backward into the steel instrument tray behind her. Metal hits the floor in a cascading crash. Forceps and retractors and sterile packaging scatter across the tile. Sade hits the tray with her shoulder, and the back of her head catches the edge of the cabinet behind it. A small cut opens above her right eyebrow. Blood, thin and immediate, starts sliding down her face. The room erupts. 3 nurses move at once. The intern in the corner says, "Oh my God!" Just those 3 words, barely a whisper, but everyone hears it. Security, who appeared in the doorway the moment the crash happened, freeze immediately. Because touching an assemblyman's body without his consent, even to protect someone else, is a career-ending action. Maybe worse. Nobody knows what to do. And then Sade stands up. Slowly, carefully, like someone who has learned that how you rise after a fall matters more than the fall itself. There is blood on her face. Her scrub top is pulling sideways from the impact. One of her gloves has torn and needs replacing. She looks at the tray scattered across the floor. She looks at Park Min-yi, and then she turns to the patient. Move, she tells the nearest nurse, calmly. I need fresh gloves and a new chest kit. Someone pick up that floor, now. They obey, immediately, without question. Park looks almost offended by this, by the fact that she stood back up, by the fact that she turned away from him, by the fact that his violence, which has worked before, which has always worked before, simply did not land. You still think you're untouchable, he says. Sade answers without looking at him. No, she says quietly. Just that, one word. It confuses everyone, because it doesn't sound defiant, it sounds honest. And then the monitor screams. That long, flat, unrelenting tone that means the heart has stopped. The room shifts instantly into a different gear, the gear of emergency, of pure function, where personalities and politics and fear and race and class all dissolve, because there is only one task and only one person in the room capable of doing it at the level required. He's in VFib. Charge the paddles to 200. Push 1 milligram of epi now. Somebody get me a tube, he needs to be reintubated. His O2 is dropping. Move faster. Move. Park Min-yi steps backward. Not voluntarily. His legs do it for him, responding to something ancient and biological, the recognition that whatever is happening at that table is beyond his jurisdiction, beyond his authority, beyond everything he controls. He watches Dr. Sade Bello work. And for the first time in 20 years of wielding power over other people, he feels genuinely small. Because watching her is terrifying. Not in a loud way, in a quiet, absolute way. The way a force of nature is terrifying, not because it means you harm, but because it is completely indifferent to you. It will do what it does whether you are watching or not, whether you approve or not, whether you are a parking attendant or an assemblyman. Her hands move with a precision that seems impossible under the circumstances. Her voice cuts through the noise of the room like a frequency only her team can hear. She calls each intervention before the monitor confirms the need for it. She is, in this room, in this moment, something beyond ordinary human capability. 11 minutes. For 11 minutes, she fights for a life that was almost gone. And then a pulse. Weak, irregular, but real. The monitor's tone shifts from flat to staggered, then to something approaching rhythm. The room exhales collectively, a sound like wind moving through a building. One of the nurses, the young one, the one who started barely 6 months ago, puts her hand over her mouth and starts crying silently. Sade removes her gloves, sets them on the tray, presses 2 fingers to the boy's wrist for a moment, feeling it herself, confirming it. Bleeding is controlled. Heart rhythm is sinus with some ectopy. We'll manage that in ICU. If he makes it through the next 6 hours without another event, he's going to live. She says this to the room, and to no one in particular. She does not say it to Park Min-yi. She does not look at Park Min-yi. Transfer him to ICU. I want continuous monitoring, 12 lead every 2 hours, and I want a cardiothoracic consult on the books for first thing tomorrow morning. Then her pager vibrates. Sade looks at the pager, and something changes in her face. Just slightly, just a flicker, the kind that would pass unnoticed if you weren't watching her closely. But the nurse who's been beside her for 3 years has been watching her closely for 3 years, and she has never, not once, seen that look on Dr. Sade Bello's face before. It isn't fear exactly. It's the look of someone who knew a thing was coming, hoped it wouldn't, and is now accepting that it has arrived. Transfer him, she repeats quietly. I'll check in before the end of my shift. She walks out of the trauma bay. The hallway is cool and empty and fluorescent in the way hospital hallways always are, the kind of light that flattens everything, makes everyone look equally tired, equally mortal. She stands for a moment with her back to the trauma bay door, eyes closed, just breathing. Then she opens her eyes and walks. At the far end of the hallway, 3 men are standing very still. Not nurses, not doctors, not administrators. They're wearing black suits with the particular stillness of people trained to be invisible until they aren't. They don't fidget. They don't check their phones. They just stand there, waiting, like they have been waiting for exactly as long as was needed and not a second more. The tallest one sees her coming. He steps forward and bows, not the polite, shallow bow of a business greeting, deep, almost formal. Madam, I apologize for the intrusion. You shouldn't have called him, Sade says, low, firm. We had no choice. 2 of our people were in the building when the assemblyman arrived. When we saw the situation deteriorate, he pauses. Chairman Kang would not have forgiven us if we had waited. I had it handled, she says. Yes, the man agrees. You always do, but he wasn't willing to let you handle it alone, not tonight. Behind her, the trauma bay doors open. Park Min-yi walks out. He catches the tail end of this exchange. Specifically, he catches the words Chairman Kang, and his face does something interesting. It goes from the flushed, adrenaline-thick expression of a man who just watched his son almost die, through surprise, through something that resembles confusion, and finally settles on the pale, specific shade of white that belongs to a particular kind of fear. Who did you say? None of the 3 men in suits answer him. Let me tell you what I know about Kang Woo-jin, and understand almost no one knows very much. That's intentional. That's the point. He is 42 years old. He was born in Busan to a fisherman and a seamstress, and by the time he was 20, he had already made 2 different criminal organizations deeply regret their interest in his neighborhood. Not through violence, or not primarily. Through intelligence. Through patience. Through an ability to see 3 moves ahead that made his enemies feel, consistently, like they were fighting someone who had already won. By 30, he controlled most of the private logistics networks between Korea and Japan. Not the official ones. The other ones. The ones that move things that have no paperwork and no customs declaration and no record of ever existing. By 35, prosecutors in 3 countries had tried to build cases against him. Every case collapsed. Not because evidence was tampered with, or not entirely. But because the evidence somehow was always just slightly not enough, like trying to catch water in your hands, he slipped through every time, clean and unbothered. By 40, he had diversified, legitimate businesses, art, real estate, a foundation that built schools in rural Gyeongnam, the kind of diversification that makes it very hard to point at a man and say, there, that is the criminal. But everyone knows. Gangs obey him, politicians fear him, prosecutors pretend he doesn't exist, and the stories about what happens to people who cross him are told very quietly in the kinds of places where people know better than to speak clearly. Nobody knew he had a personal connection to a Nigerian trauma surgeon at Seoul General Hospital. But then again, nobody really knows anything about Kang Woo-jin until he decides they should. The elevator opens. The sound that happens next is hard to describe. It is the absence of sound, the way a large and dangerous animal can silence a forest simply by moving through it. Every conversation in the hallway stops. Every person who glances up and then glances away quickly. The subtle, instinctive repositioning of bodies toward walls and doorways. Kang Woo-jin steps out. He is not physically imposing in the way you might expect. He is tall but not massive. Lean, controlled, every movement carrying the quiet efficiency of someone who has never wasted a gesture in his life. He wears a black overcoat over a charcoal suit, and the overall effect is less fashionable than architectural, like someone built him to fit into spaces and then simply let him exist in them. His face is still, not blank still. There is a difference. Blank means nothing is happening behind the eyes. Still means everything is happening behind the eyes, but none of it is escaping. 6 men follow him. They position themselves without instruction, spread along the hallway in a pattern that is clearly not accidental. Woo-jin's eyes move through the corridor once. The 3 men in suits, the trembling assemblyman, the wife, who has now gone completely silent, standing slightly behind her husband. And then Sade. He crosses to her, 3 steps, and then very carefully, very gently, he reaches up and touches the cut above her eyebrow. His thumb barely makes contact, barely enough to feel, let alone to hurt, but the gesture is so unexpected, so tender coming from a man radiating the energy of someone capable of terrible things, that everyone watching forgets to breathe. "Who did this?" he says softly. It is not a question. He already knows. "It's handled," Sade says. "Sade." "Woo-jin, I had it handled." He looks at her for a long moment. Then his eyes shift, past her shoulder, down the hallway, to the spot where Assemblyman Park Min-yi is standing very still. Sade turns to look at Woo-jin. "Don't," she says. He glances at her. "Don't make this about ownership," she says. "I don't belong to you." "I know," he says, and the way he says it, not dismissive, not defensive, but simply matter of fact, makes it clear this is not a new conversation between them. "That's not what I meant." "Then say what you meant." He looks at her for a moment, and something shifts in his face, not dramatically, but enough. A loosening, like a word in a foreign language that only has one translation, and the translation is both insufficient and exact. "You are the most important person I know," he says, "and someone hurt you, and I'm here." Sade looks at him for a long time. "Your timing," she says finally, "is extremely inconvenient." "I know. I had it managed." "I know that too." "Then why?" "Because knowing and feeling are different things," he says quietly, "and I couldn't sit in a car knowing you were in here bleeding and do nothing." The hallway is completely silent. Even the machines, somewhere distant, seem to have paused. Sade exhales. "His son will live," she says. "I want that on record. Whatever happens next, he came in with a cardiac tamponade and a tension pneumothorax at 11:47 p.m., and he will wake up in the ICU tomorrow morning. That's what I did tonight." "I know," Woo-jin says gently. "I know exactly what you did tonight." Woo-jin turns back to Park Min-yi. The assemblyman is still standing in the hallway. He hasn't moved toward the elevator, hasn't called out to his security, hasn't made any of the aggressive gestures he would normally use to reclaim a situation. He is, for the first time in a very long time, genuinely uncertain about what comes next. "Let me be direct," Woo-jin says. "I am not going to threaten you." Park blinks. "Men like you build careers on identifying threats and neutralizing them. If I threaten you, you have a framework. You know what to do. You call your lawyers, your party chair, your contacts in the NIS. You start building a counter-narrative. You're very good at that." He tilts his head slightly. "I'm not going to give you a framework." "What does that mean?" Park asks. His voice is working hard to stay steady. "It means you will return to your life tomorrow," Woo-jin says. "And you will sit with what you did tonight. And the way it unfolds from here will depend entirely on you, on the choices you make in the next few days. You don't have power over." "Your son is alive," Woo-jin says simply. "Because of her, take him home when he's ready, be grateful, that's all I'm asking." He turns away. Park calls after him. "That's it, that's all you came here for." Woo-jin doesn't stop walking. "For now," he says quietly, "yes." Everyone leaves gradually. The security, the bodyguards, the assemblyman who shepherds his still trembling wife toward the elevator with the particular posture of a man who has realized he is carrying new weight on his shoulders. The nurses disperse back to their stations. The intern who whispered, "Oh my God," during the assault, stands in the doorway of the trauma bay for a moment longer than everyone else, watching Sade, then goes back inside. The three men in black suits disappear. They do not say goodbye. They simply aren't there anymore. And in the hallway, quiet now, all the drama bled out of it, Sade stands with Woo-jin. Just them. "How bad is the cut?" he asks. "It needs 1 stitch, maybe 2. I'll have someone do it later." "I can drive you." "I have 2 more hours on shift." He nods, of course she does. "After then." She looks at him for a moment. "How did you know so quickly?" she asks. "I have people in the building." "You have people everywhere." "Yes." "Does that ever get heavy?" she asks, "carrying all of it?" He considers this genuinely, not dismissing it, not deflecting, actually considering. "Yes," he says, "sometimes." "Me too," she says. A pause, not uncomfortable. The kind of pause between two people who have learned each other well enough to be quiet together. "You know the worst part," she says. "He'll go home tomorrow and he'll tell this story to someone, and in his version I'll be the problem." "Yes," Woo-jin agrees. "And there's nothing I can do about that." "No." "And his son will be alive because of me." "Yes." "And that has to be enough." He looks at her carefully. "Is it?" She thinks about it honestly. About 11 years of being the best in the room and never quite being seen as such. About hands that don't shake and a voice that doesn't waver and a cut above her eyebrow that will scar slightly and be there every morning when she looks in the mirror. "Tonight," she says finally, "it's enough." She turns toward the trauma bay. "Come get me at 2, she calls back without looking. "I'll be the one still covered in someone else's blood." He almost smiles, almost. "I'll be here," he says. There are 2 kinds of power in this world. There's the kind Park Min-yi had, loud, visible, held in political offices and sharp suits, and 6 men who follow you into hospital corridors. Power that other people can see and respond to and fear. And then there's the other kind. The kind Sade Bello carried every single night of her career. The power to hold a failing heart in your hands and refuse to let go. The power to be slapped in public and turn back to the work. The power to absorb everything the world throws at you and convert it, quietly, into something that saves lives. Those 2 kinds of power met in a hallway at Seoul General Hospital at 11:52 p.m. on a Wednesday. And whatever anyone tells you about what happened that night, whoever claims to have won, whoever claims to have come out on top. A 17-year-old boy woke up the next morning. That's what happened. That's who won.